Welcome to Chapter 7. We are going to be looking at risk. We have been talking about risks, and it is high time that we take a serious look at what is the risk in project or what are the risks in project and see how you can mitigate those risks. Basically, you cannot eliminate risks totally in a project, but you can mitigate them. You can lower the impacts of the risk. And we're going to be talking about how you manage risks in this chapter. So let us describe the risk management process in projects. For that, you need to identify the project risks. Once you identify the project's risks, then you can assess the significance of those project risks. And you can manage risks by giving certain or placing some responses or planning some responses. One of the responses can be contingency plans, and we will see the role the contingency plans play in the risk management process. We will also look at how we can respond to the opportunities in a project and how contingency funds and time buffers are used to manage a project. And then we will look at the need for risk management. And finally, we will talk about change control process. The outline of the project of this chapter is risk management process followed by 3 steps to risk management. The first step is risk identification. The second step is risk assessment. The third step is risk response development. We will talk about contingency planning and opportunity management and the time buffers. And finally, we will see how to work with response control of the project risks and change control management. Risk is an uncertain event. Risk is a condition that, if it occurs, has a positive or negative effect on project objectives. Yes, certain risks can give you positive results. Most of the risks gives you negative effect. No amount of planning can overcome or control risk, but you can mitigate risks. So risk management is an attempt to recognize and manage potential and unforeseen risks or trouble spots that may occur when the project is implemented. A risk event is like what can go wrong. The consequences are how to minimize the risk event's impact. The anticipation is what can be done before an event occurs. The contingency plans is what to do when an event occurs. So this diagram gives you how risks can go with projects and how it can impact projects. So if we have these defining, planning, executing, and delivering phases in a project life cycle, during the defining phase, the cost to fix the risks are going to be very, very low. But you'll also see a lot of risks because you can see those risks. You can see that there are chances of risk occurring further into the project clearly at that time. Okay? And you have to take advantage in defining, during the defining and planning stages, you have to take advantage of identifying all the risks and trying to put a very nice risk management plan. If you do not do that, you will see more and more risks coming up. You will see risks coming up. during the executing phase, but the cost of fixing those risks will go up as you go progressing into the project. And the last thing you want is to have risks during delivery period because the cost to fix will be enormous. So it is good to know all the risks. It's good to understand all the risks beforehand. So risk management is a proactive approach. It is not a reactive approach, it's a proactive approach. It reduces surprises and the negative consequences of the risk. The project manager will have enough time to take appropriate actions using this risk management ways. It gives you better control over the future simply because you understand the risks, you know exactly how to manage those risks as they occur. It improves the chances of reaching the project objectives, and it improves the probability that you can finish the project on time and within budget and meeting required performance. The risk management process consists of risk identification, risk assessment, risk responsible development, and risk responsible control. During any one of these steps, you will find new risks, or you may find new risks, and you need to go back to the risk identification and see what to do or analyze the project to identify the sources of risks. During the risk assessment, you need to assess the risks in terms of the impact it is going to create, the severity of impact that is going to create, the likelihood of occurring, and how to control this, or whether you can control this at all. The risk response development develops a strategy to reduce possible damage. It develops contingency plans. And then the risk strategy is to implement, monitor, and change the risks at all, how to manage these risks. So in step one, risk identification, you generate a list of all possible risks that could affect the project. And usually you use the tools, brainstorming tools, and other techniques that are available to you to look at the possible risks or identify the possible risks. And you can use a risk breakdown structure to identify and analyze risks. You need to understand which risks pose the maximum impact so that you can make contingency plans or avoid that risk or try to mitigate those risks really well. The risk breakdown structure looks like this. Suppose you have a project, you can have various factors, dimensions. The dimensions of the project are technology, external stakeholders or external environment, anything to do externally to the project, anything internal or organizational or anything to do with the project inside the company, managing the projects, and of course the customer related issues. In all these dimensions, come out with all these kind of risks that is possible. Do you have in the technical requirements, are there any risks? In the technology, are there any risks? Are there any complex interfaces that you need to do? Are there any performances and reliability risks in technology sense? What are the quality risks when you're talking about technology? Those are some of the things that you can take a look at. With the customer, you can say, what are the risks that you think the customer will have when you go for the acceptance of your project to the customer? When you're coordinating the risks of the customer, what are the risks that you can see? What kind of risks that you can anticipate in training? What kind of risks that you can anticipate in customer support? If you can understand all these risks and put it down as a risk register, it's called a risk register. Simply a document of all the risks that you see, and also how to tackle those risks, how to mitigate those risks. So the partial risk profile for a product development project from the book is: in the technology area, technical requirements or the requirements stable. That is a risk that you can take a look at. In the design part of it, does the design depend on unrealistic or optimistic assumptions? During the testing, will you have all the testing equipment available as and when needed? That is a risk that you can think of. In the development area, is the development process supported by good procedures, good methodologies, and you have enough tools, the right tools? When you're scheduling, is the scheduling dependent upon the completion of other projects? That is a risk that you can think of. During budgeting, how reliable are the cost estimates? Do you want to use a detailed cost estimate? Or do you want to use an approximate method of cost estimate? Whether you have used a top-down or a bottoms-up estimation, all those things you should be thinking about. In the quality sense, what are the quality considerations in the design? And how those quality can be achieved? Are there risks involved in achieving those quality? Now, in the management of projects, do the project manager has enough authority? If the project manager do not have an authority, then what are the risks that the project will face? In the work environment, do people work cooperatively? Is there good teamwork? Are there any teamwork risks? In staffing, whether we have enough people who are experienced or are we understaffed? Do we have enough people working on this project? Do you have enough experts working on this project? Does the customer understand what it will take to complete the project? That is a big risk, because if you do not understand the customer, then your project may not go very well, simply because the customer might be thinking of something and you are thinking of something else as a project manager, and that's not going to work very well. And of course, if you have contractors, there are a lot of risks to the contractors.